together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin this evening. Thank you for joining us, your very valuable time while we get ready for these changes. You knew the next big shoe to drop was going to drop somewhere around now, May to June. We had that breather, every time they have to let off the gas for just a moment. You can't keep people in perpetual stimulus. That kind of vibratory pattern where they're skittish and it's, you get locked in fear. The society gets locked like it was in the beginning of COVID. Can't have the gas, all gas, no brakes. There was a let off there for the last couple weeks or so. Well, it's starting again. Pakistan this time. I'm going to call it, as before, it's going to be one of these smaller nations that is going to be the trigger, the catalyst, and slow in progression up the ladder to take things down. Now, the IMF's not going to re-up the loans from Pakistan. They needed an extra $36 billion. Now, they're going to default on any of their physical debts. So you have to wonder how many of those debts are wound directly back into U.S. banks on exposure in emerging markets, and how this seemingly small country that 20 years ago that wouldn't have blinked an eye, but now with the purposeful rug pull at our fingertips here, it's just quirky that the IMF wouldn't refund them. So it looks like this is going to be the flashpoint here. Something with the $36 billion won't be delivered. They're going to default a thing, and then that's going to trigger many, many defaults, derivatives, credit swaps, etc. That's going to end up being far more. That's going to ripple through our financial system here. But again, it's going to be on purpose. So what can we get ready for? Got Ransom Godwin here tonight joining me. So Ransom, yeah, man, the 26,000-year cycle concludes, and we're left with this mess here. It's just interesting how, the great year culminates or begins, however you look at that. And then at the same time, we have a great reset on the planet. It's a little coincidental on the timing, a little quirky. Just saying, hey, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me. So what were you were saying? Pakistan might be, one of those little nations, nuclear armed, I might add, little nations with I don't know, what do they have? They're close to 1 billion people themselves in Pakistan. Maybe not. I know they have a lot of people in Pakistan, and it's a very arid country, but they have nukes. And I was watching the other day them slam the gates to each other, Pakistan and India. That's such a weird custom that they've developed there. But anyway, I was reading this article talking about Pakistan wanting to pay in Chinese yuan for Russian crude oil because they're yet another nation that is opting out of the U.S.-backed petrodollar. And I'm just seeing,
lo and behold, they're having a problem.
Yeah, I'm just seeing, I'm waiting, and I'm not being sarcastic on this. I'm waiting for Texas to have the worst time it's ever had in its history. And the reason I say that is because, A, they have some of the longest border between U.S. and Mexico, and B, they're floating around bills on the House at the state legislature to have a backup gold, silver currency. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with, other famous people that also went down this road, or famous countries. It never ends well because the bank puts the hurt on them. And we were talking last week and the week before that about the building pressure on the southern border. And now it's absolute bedlam. And just like I said a week ago, that I suspected there would be a combat zone there. That's pretty much what you have, from McAllen all the way to Tijuana. That's a big stretch of North America that is going to be not unlike a demilitarized zone. And, I was just watching thousands of people run across one of the border passages in El Paso today. And the people that were going around even that. So it's like if you've ever watched ants on the march and you put some kind of obstacle in front of them, they'll just go around it. It's just like that at the border, with multiple groups of thousands of people that are camping and waiting. And, unlike a lot of stereotypical Americans, I actually are paying attention to who's coming across. And they have this term OTM, which is called other than Mexican by the U.S. Border Patrol. And they use that term frequently. And they've been using it a lot more frequently recently. And the reason for that is because other than the cartel, Mexico or Mexico's residents aren't having much interaction with this surge of people that are coming and pummeling the ports of entry from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Most of these people are from nations that you wouldn't expect. Like I was watching some of them go inside a hole in the fence on the other side of El Paso. That's not where the main thousands of people are coming through. They were just going through the little hole in the fence. And judging by their headgear, there were several Sikh people, and like the next 20 or so look like they might have been from Pakistan or Afghanistan, who knows? And then 30 or 40 Chinese nationals, and they're catching people that have been on this famous war on terror watch list. So the joke of this is, you remember back in 2001, they gave us the birth of the New World Order, so to speak. And I've been paying attention to this a lot. So there's a lot of symbologies going on right now. So you have the goddess, the female goddess, taking over in 2000 and 2001 in the 9th month, the exact amount of months it takes to have a baby. The twin towers of the old past 2,000 years, basically, that represented that system, just collapsed in front of Columbia, which is a modern day representation of the female goddess. So you can associate her to Hathor and Diana and Inanna, Ishtar, and like all of these different female goddesses. And she bore witness to the birth of the New World Order, which they put up that one world trade center there. And since then, they gave us stuff like Homeland Security. They took away a 90-mile perimeter around the United States border. So like 90 miles all the way around, that includes Canada, the oceans, is a constitutional free zone. And now you have hundreds of thousands, even millions of people coming across the border that are not protected under U.S. law as far as constitutional rights given to anybody that happens to be within the borders of U.S. territory. Because that's how our Constitution is written. You don't have to be a citizen to enjoy most of the rights of the Bill of Rights. However, the policing powers of the world government created this body called Homeland Security. And Homeland Security, ironically, are the people that are in charge of the terror watch list and the war on terror and, all of the new innovations that you've had to deal with in the past 20 years, like long waits at the airlines where they strip search you if they want to, and these are people with little plastic badges from a newly formed organization, and they're just basically saying because we said so. And meanwhile, they've been training Americans to be this Chinese style prisoner in your own country, where you have to go through all of these checks, and it's increasingly come to adulthood about 2019. And did you notice right at the end of 2019, a significant event happened? The first event, I might add, that was worldwide, that had every nation take part, regardless of their supposed geopolitical relationships that they have each other. In other words, if they were rivals, enemies, it did not matter. They all participated. They all locked down. They all put masks on. They did that other thing that we're not allowed to talk about. They forced that on their citizens in different ways. So the New World Order came to birth, so to speak, right there at 2020. Boom, 20 years old, 2020. Hindsight, we get to look back, and 2020 is hindsight, and plus it's perfect vision. We got to see past the occult, and now we're just watching the collapsing old world empires, and America represented that one. That's why the towers came down here. And isn't it ironic that all of them resources, all of those billions of dollars put to protect the homeland, are now letting people that are on those very same terror watch lists and groups just walk over the border. And not only that, and I'll show some footage while you retort to that, we're shipping them wherever they want to go without any real cataloging. So meanwhile, the first world nations are getting cataloged, unbelievably, to the point where people are bragging online now that they have taken chips where they can go here, go there, all of their information, their medical history, all of it. It's all on the chip. It's either in your body or on a card or with a device. And that's obviously merging as the way that they want to have a first world civilization. But meanwhile, they're flooding it with the third world without cataloging anyone. And speaking of two-class citizens, this is how you develop a caste system in the first place, is where you have two groups of citizens with different rights. And so I don't know where it's going from here, but I suspect that everywhere in the northern latitudes worldwide is about to witness some kind of combat zone famine induced havoc for, I'm guessing, 10 years or so.
Oh, you think it'll take that long? Oh, no, it's going to begin this year. It already is. Not maybe on the famine side where we're talking African famine kind, but really lean food, very expensive food to destabilize the nation through food prices, not so much the shortages, but the price increases on this next step to the shortages. Because I was listening to Pinball Preparedness earlier today. Anybody check out Ken's channel, man? Good one. Pinball Preparedness over on YouTube. And he was talking about something similar with Cyprus did happening here in America. The possible with the debt ceiling not reached, they'll just bail everybody in. It won't be the banks. The government will bail you in. They'll bail in every bank on themselves, so then it wouldn't be a bank bail-in. So you're looking at something a little bit different, same end result. Because if a bank bails in your money, the government could tell the bank to whatever, pay off. What if you go to work and a bank doesn't pay you? Well, there'd be some respite from the government like there was with COVID-19. It was a government response. So people couldn't pay mortgages or couldn't pay rent, didn't have to. There was a lot of things because it was a company, it was a bank, it was that industry, private industry. What happens if this time it's like Cyprus, where the entire government bails in the banking system? Then what? The U.S. government says everybody in America can only get $100 per day out of the banking system. We got to stop these bank runs. So we're going to control all the single banks. No bank's it's not at the bank's fault. You're not being bailed in at the bank, so that's not it. You're an unsecured depositor, creditor with the bank. That's not it. We, the government, are taking control of the monetary system and all banks. So there's no anymore. Then they could move on a government response to move universal basic income, digital rationing cards, whatever. Because to do it through the banking system would still be one big step removed from where we needed to go in terms of the rollout, the oversight of the rollout, and if there were any patches or something that needed to be changed on the rollout. As we saw, how long did it take cards to get issued before those got digitized, before it got on a database? It was like a process. Just like you mentioned, tagging and coding everybody along the way. So what is it with this time? It does look like something unusual is about to happen, because that was a great point that you connected those two. I was seeing the very same thing you were talking about Pakistan, and to circle back for that for a second, there's 213 million people that live in Pakistan. Now, also you alluded to something like it's got a weird border. Yeah, it does, because the British reset up the borders and split, as they've done with many a nation in Africa as well. They split across tribal homelands. They split across ethnicities. They split across religious boundaries. And, once you do that, there's always going to be problems. Balkans, you name it, wherever it happens. So that was back in British days, though, 1800s? Now we come to something different. This is definitely rolling over, but they were going to move away from the dollar. Now, U.S. can't really do much against China. They're moving away and trying to get people to move away with them. But the smaller nations seem to
Did you get muted, David? I think we lost the audio from that end. Do you guys still hear me in the chat room there? If you can hear me, you're muted, David, or I can't hear you. Yeah, oh, looks like we just lost the call. No worries, we'll be back in a minute. And speaking of the Department of Homeland Security, while hundreds of thousands and millions of people enter into our country, meanwhile, the government is trying to, teach people how to identify their neighbors as radicalized. I don't know. Have you guys noticed that they have decided that there is only going to be a one-party system part of the one world government? You can't have two parties if you do that. So that means all the people that think they're on an opposing party are going to be people referred to as radicalized. And I suspect that has something to do with January 6th and the insistence of calling what was a milquetoast protest a insurgency. And my belief is that's the reason for that is so that they could continue to call Americans insurgents. Because whenever you have a military campaign in any area, you call the people that fight back or don't agree with you as an insurgency, and therefore anybody that lives in that country, i.e. America, is now an insurgent. You're an insurgent where you live, or you might be radicalized right there. But don't worry about it, because, Ukraine's going to step up their counter offensive, and, just in time, if I can find it here, they got some long range missiles from the UK. So they're going to be, sending these missiles a little further than they were, which means that it's going to widen the combat area. And then check out this. Southwest airline pilots vote to authorize strike as they push for pay raises and new contract. But less and less people are wanting to fly. It's becoming so expensive. It's becoming so weird with all the rules, regulations, especially in the past couple of years. It's become so bizarre. Might I even say Gestapo, Stasi-like? And speaking of, countries going broke, and maybe jumping onto another currency, I would think that Argentina is another one that may be going that way. As Argentina is going broke, trying to stall a full-on currency collapse in their country. And you remember, Argentinians used to be the richest people around. People used to refer to them as like, oh, he's rich as an Argentinian. He's rich as somebody from Argentina, but not anymore. They had a shift in government, kind of like South Africa. Isn't that crazy? But don't worry about it, because the future of business is here, and it's AI.
Ransom, I'm back. That was really weird the way that the call just dropped.
It's the AI, man.
Anyway, I'll make it quick in case we get interrupted again. Never fails. You know, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So now, I said something wrong. I can't access my money now. But they're going to have to take it to a point where private business won't be able to take care of the problem, and private business will be part of the problem. So it all will need to be managed up above from the governmental level. And then you can see how things could get plugged and played so easily, and they could leapfrog ahead of what you consider like normal time. Like, how long would it take for people to accept it? That's another generation away. Old people can't adopt to the tech. Oh, yes, they can. The oldest grandma in the most remote village in China is carrying a smartphone because they have to do anything now. Now, you thought that would never happen. Oh, it happened. Believe me, lightning fast. Everybody's on it. The old people learned the new tech out of pure necessity. And they did, because humans can learn anything. So that Pakistan destabilization, and also Sudan destabilized at the exact same time, wanted to go with BRICS, because Port Sudan there, controlled by the Chinese, and also access to the new Renaissance Dam in Eritrea, is the largest hydroelectric facility in all of Africa, just completed a couple years ago. And all that dammed water flows first and like 40 miles all the way through the Sudan before it comes down into Egypt. So the first flows of the outflows of the hydroelectric dam go to Sudan first, and whoever controls that water can control the crop growing zones and also the electricity. That's going to be, 40 miles to string cables is nothing. 40 miles, that's nothing. We're going to have some of the largest, habitation centers that are well lit and economy, and they were moving over to BRICS also. So you got to think about these two nations here. And Pakistan being on the Belt and Road with, Gwadar, I think is the port for natural gas loading that's there. If you go on the maritime string of pearls, Gwadar is the one in Pakistan. And then Gulf of Aden, Port Sudan is another one that terminates in the Red Sea for the Chinese. But, that's what the whole thing about Yemen was being destabilized too, because Port Aden, which is way at the tippity tip at the boot, just as you're coming into the Red Sea there, that whole area is under American control now through the destabilization of the Saudis down in that area. That is ceasing for some reason now. Suddenly it just ceases. But it seems that the Western land powers are going to be able to grab that Aden port, where Chinese aligned interests on the BRICS side of things are going to get Port Sudan. All right, that was a couple weeks ago, and then suddenly Sudan's being destabilized. So it's, again, the same powers trying to grab both of those ports inside the Red Sea and also in the Gulf of Oman area there. You can see how strategic it would be, not only for that, controlling ports inbound and outbound, but the amount of new crop grow zone they were bringing on in these areas to offset what's being lost in Canada and places like Southern Australia, Southern South Africa. There's huge crop losses happening right now. So to find a new grow zone, but the way you ping that, and, the destabilization of Pakistan and Sudan moving to the BRICS, and the destabilization of Texas moving to gold and silver-backed currency inside the state. I really can't believe all these things hit the news, and then suddenly we're seeing what's in the news right now with these things. They're definitely sending messages, don't mess with the currency system on the planet. We're the only ones that can pull the rug and then make everybody switch systems. Y'all can't do it prematurely now. At least that's the message I'm getting.
Well, things are getting weird when you see headlines like Italian pasta prices are soaring and Rome is in crisis talks with the producers because for some reason the food prices are going up. And God forbid if you can't afford your pasta. I mean, it's climbed 17.5% just, this year. But don't worry, because AI is going to fix everything for us. Kind of that's where I was going. And, there's some really smart people, and I want to point your guys' attention to this. Kamala Harris to run the AI task force to make sure, there's fairness in all the models. And, Wendy's, those box stores that I was telling you that we're going to fire everyone. Well, that's what's going on. All of these box stores, major chains, are switching over to the AI workforce. And like you said, people thought it wasn't going to happen. And I've been talking about it probably nonstop for 3 years about at least the singularity of industry and governments switching over to an AI and a robot task force of everything from work to military to computing to analytical jobs that once were funded by the government and gave people money. If you think about it, they could just switch over everything. So the argument about whether or not there's man-made climate crisis may be you arguing with chatbots for forever. But anyway, Wendy's unveils Google-powered AI chatbot at the AI drive-through window. So not only are you going to be, working with chatbot at work if you want to still have a job, but AI and chatbots are going to be, serving you. And they're going to be doing that. And then you see articles like this: the money supply has plummeted, the biggest drop since the Great Depression. You see all of these companies, not very good companies in my opinion, but all of these companies up for grab right now. Like I've been watching the headlines and the transformation of all the media switching over to new names, switching their employees around, starting new media companies. So basically they're all switching flags. They're getting ready for the reset, so they'll be known as new things. Soros and Fortress to acquire Vice Media, those guys that wrote that nice article about you. So now you'll have people like George Soros running that, like if it already wasn't biased already. And then here's one for you, David. World food prices rising again, according to the UN. The index of global food costs rose in April for the first time in a year since last year. And then this has nothing to do with anything, but I'm showing everybody a tornado on top of the Rocky Mountains in Montana. And when I moved here, when I was a kid, I used to worry about the tornadoes because I lived in Arkansas half the time, in Oklahoma, and we'd come back and forth as kids back to New Mexico, and people would tell us here, "Oh, don't worry about it. A tornado can't form here because of the mountains and the pressure and the temperature change and blah, blah, blah." Well, I'm watching video right now of a tornado rolling along the icy snow caps of the Rocky Mountains in Montana. So there went that narrative. And then I keep going back to this. At the same time as our country's being flooded with all of these people, you see these headlines like in Canada. Here's one where they were hounding Trudeau at the government argument that they do there all the time. It's kind of it looks like a made for TV program, in my opinion. They even do it different. At least it's a little more entertaining than the American version of law. But anyway, they're joking about it because of all the mandates and things that they did in Canada. Trudeau got caught whining about not being able to get his favorite deli sandwich from his favorite deli because that deli closed down because of all the green rules and then the recent worldwide team building event that we had. And I thought you would find this very interesting there. 7.6 earthquake hits off of Tonga. No tsunami warnings for that day. That was the other day. And this AI thing is going to be at the forefront of every single thing that you're going to be doing from now on. And I kind of wanted you to read or listen to some of the things because they've been keeping track of the questions that Chat GPT users ask. And, like some people are going there to find out how to make their work better. Some people are going to educate themselves. Some people are just playing with it. But it's very hilarious, some of the things that people are asking it. Like, can you help me write a love letter to a tree? Just really funny things. What would happen if we all turned into vegetables? And I'm laughing because that already happened. Is it possible for a human to outrun a cheetah if they were on a treadmill going at the same speed? So this kind of, it points to that idea that I talk about, that the AI has what we program into it. And then, accounting after accounting finds out that they're so augmented. The AIs are like the worst of the, Stasi spying on people. And at the same time, they're being programmed that you can't use facts and you can't use terminology and you can't use words. It really is a 1984 weird thing going on. And then you see all these countries, and I brought up Argentina, they're spending money like crazy to stop their currency collapse. And I was making a comment earlier about how everybody used to say that people, you were rich as an Argentinian, and then now look at the country now, and that's years of bad decisions, and then we're seeing all those same kind of decisions coming to our front doorstep with the reformulation. Like Dallas used to be one of the most affordable cities to move to. Now it's one of the least affordable. And then you see all these companies that are switching their finances around because they were tied up with regional banks. So they're moving all that money around so it'll disappear. And then what was it? I was going to tell you that you were really going to like this one about the AI. This
Use some imagination. When you said that, I had to laugh and chuckle a minute because it reminded me of that Andrew Dice Clay joke when he says, use your imagination. And he had the genie from I Dream of Jeannie. And he goes, all right, Genie, stand over there across the room and make your tongue 6 feet long. Yeah, I just started laughing at that. For some reason, you talking about AI creativity and having to, think like a genie to get that out of the bottle to work with you and stand there made me laugh my butt off because I remember that guy's humor was super funny. But again, the same thing, even way back in the 90s, he's too this, he's too that. You can't let him. His following's too big. You can't, he's saying the wrong things. We've been growing up with this our whole lives.
Right. I was watching all those sci-fi movies as a kid, when they introduced these gaming systems into the households like Pog and all that stuff. And then you had Atari and then Nintendo. And, Gen X saw the evolution of technology. That is one good thing about our age group is we saw the beginnings of it and the effects on society until this point right now. And what I've been saying, and now you've been dipping into it yourself, is realizing that every interconnection of the human domain is now about to be either ran by AI or you will have to know the algorithms to interact with the AI or learning machine just to have a job or do anything in the new workforce. AI is about to be everywhere, and that's front page zero hedge right there. And when it comes to the commercial market, people are really excited about it, the opportunities. But when has an idea ever allowed society to see its potential in the way that, we talk a lot about Tesla. We talk a lot about, all of these engines and motors and different things that have already been invented probably multiple times over, water-powered engines, hydrogen engines and ion engines and magnetic engines, and like the list goes on. And over and over again, science proves to us that they have the ability to do things, yet stay at a plateau that never allows human beings to advance in any meaningful way. And it seems like the entire planet right now is in the prime for a culling and the reset for this one reason. And it seems like if human beings were to stay on this planet and after a while realize that it may be impossible for us as Homo sapiens sapiens to remain the species we are and still go into space or do any of these other things. And we learn just about everything there really is to learn when it comes to human beings. it gets to a point where people start to lose cohesion and civilization, lose belief in their existence, kind of like a cabin fever syndrome, where like if you were stuck in a, or locked up in prison or something like that, eventually you have done everything that there can be to be done, and everything is a monotonous repeat, a recycle of everything. And we get to that point, evidently, in civilization, where the rulers realize that, because they're in real trouble once that happens, because that's when things get crazy. That's when things spiral out of control as far as behavior and psychology when it comes to human beings. And we know this because we see it. It collapses every society. And then you introduce strife into it, and a technological, fear-driven social media system and news cycle. And at the same time, these real things are happening on the earth that they're telling you to be scared of. Like they really are planning to spread war and chaos, because it was almost inevitable just on the little boys with their toys trip that every so often you got to get rid of the old stuff so you can play with the new stuff. And that's exactly what we're seeing from the commercial market. And so every bit of a economy all the way to war applications, where drones and AIs are now about to outmatch human thinking as far as analytics. But they'll never, at least so far, have imagination to the point that we do. And that seems to be why there needs to be a merging or a symbiosis or some kind of parasitical arrangement with the technology that they're creating at this point. They have to have it connected to us, not only for obvious reasons like tracking and monitoring, but also to control literally our thought processes and monitor them, making us a piece of hardware for the corporate, and I always go back to this, the Chinese style capitalist communist government, because that is what they have planned for everywhere, because without that there would be no track and control. And we're at a point where we need to see some pieces move on the board, because the Western powers don't have the capability right now to do this, and they need it. We need millions, billions of chips. So I think what we're watching is the beginnings of the rare earth mineral wars. And they'll be called something else. We'll be calling them about political stuff. We'll be saying it's about hunger. You remember what we've done in North Africa for decades, where we kind of played politics with the UN and delivering food, or giving them GMO crops that they can't grow back, and then allowing warlords to take over the food. And I see this type of situation reoccurring right here to our southern border, where cartels are very powerful. They're very armed. They're no joke. They're in proportion to the Mexican military. So to say that there is operational control by the Mexican government is a joke, because I'm not sure exactly how many, but they were recently rearmed with newer weapons in this program that was both fast and furious. So this has all been leading to this point in time. All of their little programs, cohesion is happening with all of these things that have started about, I'm going to say 2001 is when they really got serious, because they had, for some reason, they put it in high gear. And I think it has something to do with the turnover of the precession of the equinox and coming into this new age, which I circle back to, is the age of a female goddess, the water bearer Aquarius. And you sent me a lot of interesting stuff, and I want to get into that. And it looks like Vedic charts, so I'm really curious of what you got. So I have them in order. If you want to talk about those pictures there.
Yeah. It does seem we've come to the end of an age, doesn't it? It does seem like there's a fire sale. Nothing's meant to last from this previous, whatever you called it, build up until now. But you can have so clearly that whatever was, and it's not being brought into the new world. It's actually being cut as you would, trim something off with a pair of scissors. It really is that clean and that easy to understand, and that in your face for everybody to see. You have to think about where in the world is not going to be a valuable resource spot anymore. Now, as we move into these new cycles, obviously areas on the planet are going to change also. So which are going to be the better areas or which are going to be the worst areas? Because you could do a business assessment, if you will. Do you want to keep it? Do you want to cut your loss right now? And what do you want to do with it? I mean, the cycles are here, they're inbound, and these planets, the way the geometry that they're lining up. Now, Ransom, I'm looking at March 1st, so leave that there. I know there's a little delay on the stream here. But as we come out into 2024 October, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are going to create this perfect square as observed from Earth. Electromagnetism off of our sun is going to change in addition to these gravitational electromagnetic bodies themselves. Jupiter was an unignited star. For those of you who don't know, it was an unignited brown dwarf. So, we're talking about some of our powerhouses here in our own solar system, and lore and legends say that Saturn was a second sun. It glowed. So that means that there was a transference of potentiality or sharing of fields, and that flow of current coming down was enough to power whatever field around Saturn to allow it to start glowing. Now, I'm really wondering if there were any rings at that point, because you got to think, if you're going to get a plasma sheath on the outside of something that turns into a luminescent body, I don't know if those rings would be there, if that was a collapse from the last time. And then this is what stars do once the current flow turns off enough where they discharge, and they're no longer a conduit along that string of the plasma flow that generated the magnetic current that was then the electricity flowing into that whole system. Obviously, that would be an end of a tendril coming off of our main sun. So Saturn and Jupiter have been well referenced that they glowed like second suns in our own solar system. So as we come around the Earth, as it moves through around each year from now, we have a year and a half left. And what I'm starting to see is normally, these planets are spread out over the 360 degrees of a circle around our solar system. You guys think, there's 360 degrees if you're looking around. Like, say you're looking top down onto the sun and you're looking at our solar system. Well, it's going to be 360 degrees like any other type of compass that you would look at. The thing is, all the heaviest gravitational bodies are all synced up in this one tiny quadrant of our own solar system, which only happens. This particular alignment here once every 2,000 years. Which goes right back into the reason we're talking about the water bear and all these changes. Like, this happened 79 AD was the last time that this particular conjunction was so precise from the Earth, measured and perceived as a square in the outer solar system. 79 AD was the last time. So there's massive changes just based, if I didn't know anything and I wasn't even watching any news or anything, I would know electromagnetically there's massive changes inbound just because of the way that the current flowed through the Earth from the sun into these other outer planetary second magnetic field or magnetic anomaly, whatever you want to call it. But now here's the magic that keeps happening, and a little long-winded to explain it. But these earthquake windows we're going through and these volcanic windows that we're entering, Earth's really getting grabbed by all these different magnetic fields off the planets, just in sync, like one after the other after the other. It's like getting hit by a box, like 1, 2, 3. Usually, if these gas giants are spread out across the solar system, we'll come rocking through like one interlocking of an electromagnetic field exchange from, like, say, Jupiter, Sun, and Earth, and we might go through that, once a year, maybe twice. And a locking of Saturn, Earth, and the Sun, you would come through it if you were on the front side of the Sun once, if you're on the back side of the Sun twice, if however you want to count that. But now, each and every single month, we're rocking through Jupiter's, Saturn's, Neptune's, Uranus's. Like, it's from one to the other in almost instant fashion if you look at something on a wider scale. Like the orbit of our planet, one whole year to go around that. You think you might have these, interactions, like I say, maybe 8 times total if you want to count in front of the sun and behind the sun each time you pass that electromagnetic locking, whether it's Jupiter, whether it's Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, whatever. There's only 8 of those. Usually that happens spread out over an entire year. But now it's crazy. We're going in. Jupiter locks next, 2 days, we're locking in with Saturn. Oh, wait, 3 days after that, it locks with Uranus and Saturn. And then the next time, 2 days after that, it's locking in with Neptune. As we step around, these things are more and more lining up. So wherever we're looking at, it's like a trident grabs us, a square grabs us. There's a direct line from 2 planets grabbing us with the sun. The electromagnetic coupling and decoupling is ferocious in time span here. And as we come into the solstice of this year, December 21st, we got Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune's out there, and you start to get this V formation. And if you're talking about, the original symbols, if you talk about symbology and we go back to the original symbols for man is a triangle upward like a pyramid. Female is the opposite, is a downward triangle or a downward facing pyramid. So if you look at the different configurations of Uranus, Jupiter, and Neptune, or inversely Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn, that would be the male end of it, and Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune, the inverted pyramid. Our Earth is rocking through different of these possibilities. The quake window is going to continuously be opening. I was only looking at the largest amount and the most heavy, densest gravitational electromagnetic effects on our planet from these gas giants on cross patterning only. My mind woke up. I don't know what it was. I just had this epiphany the other day. After that Tonga earthquake, we were locked in with Uranus. So then I said, all right, well, we're locked in with Uranus. Now what? Look over there. Every single time we come for the next 2 weeks, almost every 2 weeks, we interlock and decouple with another gas giant. Just they're so closely aligned that at whatever week we're in, we're going to unlock and relock and recouple with another electromagnetic field of all these interplaying in their own magnetic fields out in the outer solar system. You look at that May 11th one, you got Earth down in there, you got Jupiter, Neptune, and Saturn. Again, it's that inverted pyramid shape there. And you're interlocking with Uranus once again, May 11th. That was the quake that occurred over in Tonga. So now I'm looking at it, as the Earth swings around, just even in another week or two, we're going to start locking with Jupiter and Saturn at the exact same time in less than a month. And then as we swing around there, then it's going to lock in. And then weeks after that, it'll start locking in with Jupiter, Neptune, and Uranus all at the same time. And we're going to continually come in and out of these intensifying fields because the sun's stepping down in its electromagnetic frequency. This phase state is changing. The Berkey current feeding that star is decreasing. And this is the reason we're seeing decreased magnetic field on our planet. Now that does not go to zero, my friends. That magnetic potentiality moves. It's going to start shifting into the other planets out that can take on that charge and balance it. It's going to jump. Sun steps down 10%. That 10% of potentiality is going to move through the rest of the solar system. It is going to end up somewhere. So what if that extra 10% load rolls over into Saturn? Do you think its atmosphere will glow faster? Do you think it will glow brighter because it's moving faster? You remember Jupiter was glowing, 10x brighter auroras? That's an exact effect. So this potentiality of charge moving through. So what if the sun steps down 20%? That is going to go elsewhere in our solar system and be grabbed. Like what if Jupiter starts glowing like a second sun, but it would be almost as bright as the full moon. Can you imagine what chaos that would cause on this planet? If Jupiter suddenly started glowing as bright as the full moon? What if Jupiter and Saturn both started glowing as bright as the full moon? We had two new in the skies. That would have freaked people out because you'd have a full moon and Jupiter like a full moon and Saturn like a full moon, which goes right back into they could see by day. They could, it was a 24. It was just a little bit different world where there was always light at night. And, anybody out there, and thank you, Ransom, for putting that up. Anybody out there that understands like astro charts, looking at 23rd of October, 2024, but you look at this, the way it's lining up into a hexagram at the different time. Look at that 3:33 p.m. on 23rd October, 2024. And things that I'm seeing here are, I'm not the best chart reader. I just delve into it. I'm not a studier of it exactly like I do with the solar magnetics. But I just don't normally see this type of hexagrams that are so precise or triangles that are so precise. Overlapping patterns that looks like it's actually moving as if you were looking into Meteoron's cube in, like a 4D version where it actually moved after you locked onto the pattern within it, that then it started moving in itself. Yeah, there you go. That one. What's that? 16th of April, 2025. This is when we're going to start to get pelted with all the space debris because the Earth will be outside of the magnetic field, and every gravitational body and electromagnetic body in our entire solar system will be behind the Earth. So when you're seeing all those blue triangles, all those planets in the same quadrant, we're going to be on everything is going to get pulled directly into the face of the Earth because everything is going to get pulled into our solar system through our planet first. And these are, some mind-blowing things that we're about to go through. And I can't believe that it overlays on top of all the resetting on the economy, the finance, the food prices, the banking system, the supply chain systems, all this collapsing at the exact same time that all this is about to happening in play in the next year and a half. Just something we haven't seen in thousands of years occur again. Now, for you to tell me that those two are just randomly happenstance, I'll tell you that you need to go see a psychiatrist. But I can't make a medical opinion because I'm not a certified doctor. I was just, like I say, live action role play. Just saying, if you saw that on TV, you might say, hey, go see a shrink, man. If you don't see that, I don't know.
Yeah,
what do you think about the geometry there, Ransom? Some of the things looked pretty interesting on those astro charts.
Yeah, when I was actually scrolling through the thumbnails to change the picture, it looks like you could see the wheel turning kind of through the pictures because they're moving by real fast. Actually, I've always thought that was a trip that they came up with that style of keeping track of everything because it does give you like a geometric idea of, the shape of what's going on. I find this picture right here, 2024, 1st of March, 9:00 a.m. as a very interesting because it really depicts how vulnerable Earth is during this time period. Because, usually we got all of these protectors out there, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, no pun intended there. But it's moving around, like you said, at various places, kind of attracting objects that are coming in interstellarly, and maybe even just from, they talk about the Oort cloud and how all these objects are maybe circling in that thing, or that idea that there's all of these comets, asteroids, etc., that are on these paths, and many of them we've never even seen because no one noticed them when they went by because some of them you can't even see, and now we have the near Earth object, whole alarm system where they're trying to keep track and all of this stuff. But usually what you see is some article that says, hey, a new rock flew past Earth last Saturday, almost killed us. You would have never known because it just flew by and we never even seen it till it was on its way out. My point being, when you look at this planetary alignment here, you see all of the gas giants and even the inner rocky worlds all on one side of the sun. That means the entire gravity of the solar system, not counting the sun and the Earth and the moon, is all on one side, which leaves us completely open to interstellar space, not only from cosmic rays, right? Because there's no magnetic fields in there to buffer that from us. But then you also get incoming objects with no protection.
We need protection. Wear protection. Those of you in Vegas. We'll be right back. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin, and the Ice Age Conversations. Are you ready for the cycle changes?
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack, because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down, and things that you think about it right this second. Everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps. The 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. Political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
When we're talking about these seeds, and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way, weather, war, whatever it is, you're prepared, you have security. At least you know that your belly's going to be full so that you can continue on the work that needs to be done to stabilize everyone's life around you.
Sage Conversations live radio program right here, Revolution Radio, streaming out onto different YouTube platforms, Facebook, Vigilante TV, what's up? Rumble, thanks for joining in. And we're trying to extend the message out because we want to have more conversations with more people. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, continue to throw them in the comment boxes. We're trying to read through that as we go through the evening here. What resonates with you? What part do you think that, it's more the question, how much time do you really think we have left before the wheels really start to come off where the car's undrivable? Because it appears that we're getting really close to something like that, but it always seems to be a dangling like carrot that brings you out. By all accounts, the wheels should have completely fallen off, after last year, at the end of the year. There's so many people pointing to the end of last year. That was going to be it. But it wasn't. And then we hear almost 6 months later, and it seems to be almost it. So I'm curious what you think on the actual timelines might be. And Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk about these issues tonight, because we need to keep it family-friendly advertising on some other platforms that we know. So if you consider free speech a valuable thing, consider supporting Revolution Radio right here so Ransom and I can continue to bring this message uninterrupted, except the phone call cut on Skype when I was talking about Pakistan being destabilized because they wanted to go away from the dollar along with Texas. And that was your putting those ideas together, Ransom. I'll throw Sudan in. We'll put a cherry on top of the destabilization. But anyway, back to the second hour. I was just curious. I will start with the same question with you then. Really, Ransom, like how close do you think we are for the wheels really coming off? Because everything I'm looking at in the news and reading, these people that are top, that I consider top level people, keeps going, we're right here, like so close. But I don't know, is that months or half a year or a year? Really, how far is it away?
Well, hopefully we can keep kicking the bucket down the road, as they say. But all signs point to it's happening right now. It's just a slow motion train wreck. Over the past 3 years, you've seen, as predicted, a rise in food costs, a halt in shipping from around the world. You've seen food banks, food shelters, and programs like that become empty. And those are the first signs usually that something's happening. And now, we have added millions and millions of people in the mix that are going to be looking for some of those same resources. So I think it's already happening. I think the border is a very big cue that the major players in the world are picking right now to do whatever they're doing, which I think is an aimed collapse at the U.S. because they don't like certain ideas that were voiced out and spread around the world, like individual liberty, rights from our creator, things like that. They don't like that. They don't like the idea that we've been able to defend ourselves and that we can defend ourselves now. So anybody that ever decided to, invade or anything like that, as far as a military armed faction, would have a bad time. And that includes, I think, tyranny from any source. If they ever push the button too far, I think, just like the famous Japanese guy said, there's going to be something pointed at you behind every blade of grass. And that's the truth. So when it gets nasty, I don't know, because, America seems to come together and pull a rabbit out of a hat over and over again and fight off tyranny and fight right off almost collapses. We've done it before. Just think about, 1998, 99, then 2008, and then 2011. Over and over again, we barely get away from collapsing. And I don't think people realize how close we are to collapse right now. But when we talk about these cycles, the 2,000-year cycle or any real cycle, or just a natural, non-linear cycle of empires, empires are bound to fail. And usually when these conditions on Earth happen, they fail. And we see that throughout history. I don't even think today's technologically, supposedly advanced civilization could handle any of the great resets that nature has thrown at us from the past. And it makes you wonder how much of what is really true. And speaking of that, now that we're in the new Cold War, supposedly with China and Russia, I mean, basically that's what they're doing. Pick a side. You're either with them or you're with us. I don't know if you saw that Trump town hall meeting. And now I kind of don't like Trump myself because I think he's a pharma salesman. But other than that, he was just knocking it out of the park there, and they're asking him, well, which side? How come you won't pick Ukraine? How come you won't pick Ukraine? How come you won't just say pick Ukraine? And he said, hey, I just want everybody to stop dying. Unfortunately, that's obviously the plan, is for there to be mass casualties, mass dying, disrupted food chains, geopolitical instability around the world. And we are not out of the woods. We're not protected here. It's just a slow train wreck here, and we can see it happening. I'm just waiting for when the digital rationing card that's already out there, it's called food stamps, EBT, TANF, whatever they call it in your local area. When that collapses, when that goes bankrupt, that's when you'll see a real trigger of violence, things burning down, centralized areas to go get your food that are armed, because we're seeing that from one end to the other, and there's more and more businesses pulling out of the left coast, out of the East Coast, because they can't protect their goods, they can't sell their goods, they can't have a free market, so to speak, at all. And the old free market system would have been, we're allowed to trade what we want. We could barter. We could use silver. We could use gold. We could use paper money. And when people came up and tried to take your stuff, well, we used one of those inalienable rights given to us by our creator, guaranteed supposedly under the Constitution, even though at every turn our own government tries to sabotage and undercut those rights. And now they're straight up telling us, you know what, you are going to feed the world. We've been the policemen of the world, but now you're going to feed the world until we get the votes that we want and we change over to the system that we want. And if you don't do it, we're going to give you hard times. And it looks like the plan was to give us hard times anyway. So my whole life agenda at this point is to make sure that my kids don't go hungry, and not now, not next week, not next year. While I'm alive, I'm pretty confident I could keep their bellies full. However, there's going to be a time when I'm not around, and my kids and hopefully grandchildren should know how to grow their own food, know that they're allowed to protect themselves, and all of those things that we cherish and that we've gathered and we've formulated in the culture, not thanks to the federal government or the government overseers or the substance eaters, but to the people, the hardworking farmer, the blue-collar worker that built the country from coast to coast. That's where it was built from. The major billionaires didn't build anything. People got to remember that. They paid for it, mostly with your money. And we're going into this feudalist system, and I think that's why the border is such a big deal. I don't want to just keep harping on it like that's the only problem we have. But I think that's just the only destabilization tool that Americans will accept, because we're warm-hearted people. And every time any major disaster happened around the world, Americans open their hearts up and they send clothing, they send money, they send all of these donations. Most of it gets squandered or swindled before it ever gets there. But you notice how our own government treats us when natural disasters happen. They let us wait. They don't do what they're supposed to. They don't try to prevent it, even though they know it's happening. And we have a major problem, and that's the power grid. And I know we jump a lot of subjects, but I think they're all so interconnected that they are going to use these new fear campaigns like hacking and terrorists and et cetera and et cetera. It's the reason why the power went out, the reason why the bank ain't giving your money today. Matter of fact, I had an episode today where I tried to transfer some money around and pay some bills, and I was rejected. It took like 15 hours from when I tried first yesterday until today when it finally worked. And I realized, with a couple of pushes of a button, anybody anywhere in the banking system can turn your, digital numbers into digital goose eggs in a matter of seconds. So can hacking, so can the reset of the dollar. And like you were saying last week, it doesn't even have to collapse all the way, just halfway. And we're screwed. Then there's hunger, there's rioting, there's people wondering what they're going to do. And, all of these articles about people and their stocks going down and disappearing and people not wanting to keep their money in the bank. It all sounds like a bad 1920s, movie about the Great Depression or something, but it's right now. And people are so stuck on technology that they're going to wait until the last bag of Doritos is gone before they start thinking, wait a minute, maybe I should change my behavior and lifestyle and start thinking ahead. And, with so much fake stuff out here, I'll leave you with I don't know what you want to think about it, because I know you like these kind of things. But anyway, according to an ex-Russian space boss, he found no proof up on the moon that Americans landed on the moon in 1969. There, I did it. I threw a funny conspiracy theory out there right after my realistic, factual theory about the collapse of modern society.
Are you not entertained, Ransom? Are you not entertained, listeners? I watched that town hall too. It was pretty funny. I was just watching it for what it was. Entertainment to see how big the distraction will be to keep you looking over this direction over here while the food shortages occur over there. And you won't see it until it's the last. And again, the greatest strategy is to have people fight amongst each other until, that's not needed any longer. And then everybody has gone. And wherever that gone is it underground? Is it in bunkers? Is it in the citadels? Is it off planet? Under the planet? Whatever. The way you consider public figures will have disappeared. And then we sit out here, the bug on the windshield. But the dollar doesn't even have to disappear. Everybody's it just needs a competitor. It does not have to disappear totally before the damage will be done to the system that we understand now that keeps the dollar as the number one reserve currency, former reserve. It's already lost its status, so you can't even call it a reserve currency. Like Trump, he has to call himself the former president, the former 45th president. Well, now the U.S. dollar has to call itself the former reserve currency because it's actually lost that status. It's gone now. It just needs a parallel competitor to do the damage. In the same way with the food, you don't have to be actually starving on the floor to the point where you're malnourished and you can't get up to even go to work or do any field work or any gardening. Way before that point, the disruption will be there. If your food price is 10x, how do you think that would be? You wouldn't even be starving, but if your food was 10x, how long would it take to disrupt your life? Before the point, it would be reached in the future. You might not be able to afford the food. Then what would you do? Would you sell something? Would you start to think about stealing because, hey, I don't have any other choice? Would your morals and behaviors change? I'm only stealing from a corporation. I'm only stealing food. My children are hungry. It comes down to, like it always has in history, to that point right there. So at how many times the increase in food price does that cause the disruption before there's an actual famine, before there was really big food shortages, to the point where you just can't get it? It's not available anymore. I don't care how much money you have. You literally can't get it because it just physically doesn't exist. Okay, there's a long road between here and there. But where that end destination is, I mean, what kind of disruption is along the way? And, the disruption would occur far, 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 far before that. That's what I'm saying. These events going down, and the dollar does not have to disappear in any way, shape, or form. The second competitor running parallel with it, the more traction it gets is the actual calamity that's inbound. There's currently 700 banks in the United States, 700 that have lost 50% of their value because of what they were holding as their assets. 50% of all banks in America are trillions into the negative right now and have reached out to the Federal Reserve for help. 700. That's a lot. Actually, what if the government bails in the money, not the banks? The legalities of that and the entire system of changeover moves incredibly fast. Because you were saying something about what other people had been, arrested or jailed for doing things with money. Well, Peter Schiff's father was one of them. And, there was a story of a guy. This comes on with Peter Schiff because he was the one that was associated with this. They had land out, and I'm going to say it was, Montana. Don't quote me if I'm wrong, but this is just off memory from when you brought up that thought of who's gone to jail for, messing with the money supply. It wasn't even that. It was they had proven reserves of billions and billions of dollars of gold ore in the land and the mineral rights that they owned under these thousands of acres on their ranch. Billions with a B of gold reserves proven, and they just need to set up the mines and get it out. So based on that proven reserves, they were able to get forward cash based on the gold amount. So Peter Schiff's father wanted to start a quote unquote new monetary money in the state, just like Texas is doing. But he traveled out of state with checks, and they arrested him. And they said, well, these are counterfeit. These are not legal instruments, because he was trying to issue them against gold of his own and his own bank. See, then he got in trouble, and they arrested him. He spent the rest of his life in prison. But they framed him by saying that checks, like any check, like your checking account kind of check, was an illegal money that was counterfeited because it could be cleared in gold. So carrying checks over the border, then he was arrested for interstate fraud and this sort of thing. And that's what made Peter Schiff, not that I'm a fan. I mean, he's got some great insight, but that dude's been on the economy's going to collapse high speed mode for 25 years. He'll get it right one day. But, that whole story of his father being railroaded like that, along with others that had tried to use gold and silver and start a new system. Even at that point, you're talking, how many years ago was that when billions really meant something? Like today, it's a billionaire, it's a trillionaire, whatever. Back then, it was only millionaires. And to have $1 billion is like, whoa, there's companies not even worth that much. You got that much gold under your land? What? So think about that for a second. Any kind of disruption. What if only 5 or 10% of the world, 5%, 10% of the world's payments were done in gold and silver? Like, how much that would disrupt the system anyway? Because people would catch on and go, oh, that's real solid money. I can use that anywhere at any time, and it always trades the same, and it's good everywhere. So these changes that are inbound here, I mean, you might have fun, and, I did laugh when Trump pulls it. She said something to him, and he goes, oh, hold on. I knew you were going to do that. Let me pull this out of the coat. And he had all these tweets that he wrote, like, It's almost like the entire thing's being scripted to move over for a convenient consolidation of the world's wealth, known wealth, cataloged wealth, the human resource cataloged, and everything for like a journal entry to pass on to something else is the best way I can describe it. The change we're going through, I mean, the mud flood over the Roman Colosseum in Rome, for example. I have these lithographs where it shows, 20-foot tall, 30-foot tall hills covered in grass going up partially of the way of what we know as the Roman Colosseum today. That's totally flat at ground level. Used to be, at least on one side of it, 20 to 30 foot knolls where people were picnicking and things with grass. So, these cycles come again and again. And would you let all the world's wealth just disappear and erode into nothing? No, you wouldn't. If you pulled the plug too quickly, then there'd be so many resources left across the planet that couldn't be harvested. And when I say harvested, I really swear to you, this planet Earth that we're on is farm Earth. There's something coming back to collect the mined and refined ores of this planet that will be on-sold either in our solar system on another planet or intergalaxy or intergalactic. It's the only way I could possibly look at it. And these cycles are known. We're coming back into a deep phase of cooling, heading into an ice age. And we're at the very end of the interglacial. So you have to think about that. We talked about this a few episodes ago. If you had this hidden knowledge and you understood these cycles of the onset and the intensity on not only the great year of the 26,000 year or the 52,000 round trip, so you would know it was a cycle, but 4 of those into the 100,000 year one ice age cycle. Because once you knew that the ice age would tear apart and rip and completely destroy everything, sea coasts would change, like how much gold and minerals and things would be left completely unharvested if you let that go without controlling that milking of the wealth during that transition time. Because I look at it, I was like, damn, this planet is just a farm down here. You might have some visions of being forced down a mine shaft to go dig gold or something in slave labor conditions, but you just don't have the bars around you. Or we're not under the ground, but the same amount of labor is being used to churn out something in that process or given value to go back into that process. What if, these micro receivers and these different chipsets and things that are in all the phones, maybe they're trackable because whenever it comes back to harvest it, already has the GPS located and that thing's already in the phone ready to go. And hey, thanks for each one of those little ones. Something we just, you got to think outside the box on what would be, a usable, sellable, tradable as a raw material or a refined mineral into bar form, chip form, wire form, whatever it would be that could be packed onto a ship and sent off planet. I mean, these are the very real things that I keep seeing occur again and again. And heading into an ice age, which we are now, it's scientifically shown that we are absolutely heading into an ice age. This is the longest interglacial ever recorded ever in the last 5 million years that we are currently in now. So everybody talk about global warming, if I might just rant for a second. We're stepping off of the very longest warm period between glacial cycles in the last 5 million years. That's 50 of those cycles, by the way. We are at 100,000 years. That 10,000 years of warmth on average, 10,000 average, we are way beyond that. And you have to ask yourself, I'm wondering if some sort of tech is allowing us to step off of that and ride out an additional 15 to 1,800 years longer than the average. And they're quibbling, telling you we're going into a global warming phase when in reality, for the last 5 million years, we're at the very longest stretch. And when we step off, with nothing but cooling from now to the next 90,000 years. How fast will the ice age's onset? As quickly as 10 years in some instances, as long as 1,000 in others. There's a range of those. But the history books will always try to get you to think of that 1,000-year number of entry into an ice age. Oh, it'll take 1,000 years. I'll never be alive. Our generation will be gone. Oh, it doesn't matter. My grandkids wanted that. That's what you're, supposed to think about, the gradualism and the step off into these types of big cataclysmic, It's not even civilization ending. It's more as in species ending or species bottlenecking events. What if it happens in 10 years? What would you do right now if you were the leaders of the world and you knew that there was there's this off-planet society or galactic federation society? And I really believe a lot of these things we're seeing in these science fiction movies are just portrayals of really what it's like out there. There's other markets, there's other things. So you're on Earth, okay, you're coming into a glacial period. Everything on the planet is pretty much going to get scraped to ice and completely rearranged and completely destroyed. I mean, you put this planet in 90,000 years of ice, there's no cities left. Like, you understand, once you step off of this planet and you come back 90,000 years, whatever you didn't get then is gone forever, pretty much. Like, you might find up a ground building or two or a foundation of, say, a highway or something that survived. Otherwise, you're not going to find much, because you got to think, if the ice age levels of today's world were 400 feet lower, what would happen to cities? Just think about our own modern city. If you put our modern cities under the sea for 20,000 or 30,000 years, do you think we'd find much of them? Not really. You might find some super girthy thing that would sort of have a shape of something that looked man-made, but it would be all overgrown and encrusted with everything. Think about 20,000 years under the sea. A lot of coral. That's a lot of erosion, a lot of coral, a lot of things could happen to the blocks, to round the edges, etc. So we're at that point now where the step off into the ice age is expediting whatever's going on right now. And it just does coincide with the water bearer and, like you say, Ransom, female energies of this next cycle, rebirth. So, you look out at a wider picture and, wider time frames and off-planet possibilities, and it all does seem to sync up that, yep, Earth's going to go through another 90,000-year ice period. Better salvage what you can, because it won't matter what gets destroyed on the way out, because it'll all be cleansed anyway in the next roundabout, whoever comes back in 90,000 years to remine the planet and set up the farm again. They'll be starting fresh.
I think that's why they picked the female figure for this time period. And, I think there's a lot of misinterpretation about the water bearer, because if you've ever seen any depictions of Aquarius, true, she does hold a water container, but if you ever look at the depictions from tarot cards to paintings, she's not dumping out water. She's dumping out stars. And it's funny, I started thinking about that because we were looking at those different planetary alignments when Earth is exposed, meaning that, there may be an increased chance of somebody pouring out the stars on Earth, which, by the way, would be the only way that massive flooding would ever happen again on Earth. And it also might trigger an ice age. And if you think about the female persona and how it's being portrayed right now, we have this movement of certain individuals deciding that they're more of a feminine behavior or whatever. So that you have that going on in society, but you also have the AI aspect. And if you've ever noticed, every time there's an AI, from Star Trek, the motion picture, to what's that, Ex Machina or whatever that movie was, and then you have Sophia. And if you look at all of these, they all look the same. It's a bald woman, right? It's a robotic woman. And it's really bizarre. So that's the new female kind of aspect of the time now. But if you really get into the symbology, it seems like more of a warning about what may be falling out of the sky in this time. And it's funny that you were talking about how long would an ice age last and all of that stuff. You remember that movie AI? We're talking about AI and bringing AI up. In that movie, all of civilization collapses after they have AI revolution, where they have robots, they have the greatest life, but still out there's a bunch of ghettos, people starving, unwanted robots, to the point because people are going extinct for whatever reason in the background of that plot. But if you fast forward to the future, when the little robot sinks, what world does he wake up in but a giant ice-filled planet? And they were depicting New York City because they showed the Twin Towers, and the ice the glacier was all the way up past half of those buildings, and they were talking about, the last vestiges of humankind were there buried beneath the ice. But what would happen if the water bearer, so to speak, dumped out her pitcher of stars? She's pouring out the universe, the stars, and all of the depictions in relation to Earth, and it being the time period in which we are. I think it's really fascinating that also the Pleiades is a major representation kind of the sisters, and it's a focal point of Mayan timekeeping. Every 72 or 71 point something years, whatever it is, it equates to about 72, and their entire clock is based on partly the Pleiades coming up every 72 years directly above them, which is also a group of sisters. And you also brought up when you sent me a message talking about the Mayan calendar off. I always thought it was off on purpose because everything's in cycles of 12s and 72 and etc. So when you get to the 2012 point in which they stopped, they're not accounting for that the time was just a little bit off. So it's about 12 years off, which would make the end of their calendar about 2024 in my approximation. Other people have different formulas they use. I've seen many of them depicting what the Mayans really meant. But really all that they were portraying is a changeover in the astrology, which was up in the sky, which they did have a 52,000 year knowledge of from someone, at least 26,000 years and another 26 to realize that the cycle repeated itself. So they had to have known that, and they kept this time in particular. And, when you get into the four worlds of the Hopi and the Aztec and the Mayan, and they have this idea of these worlds changing over, we're at the end of one world and the beginning of a new world. There's also prophecies about, the sacred colors of human beings, the white, black, yellow, and red, separating and then coming back to North America. That's also happened. So there's a lot of prophecy that you could read into being in this time period, including biblical prophecy and other things. But just a point that somehow they named this part of the procession of the equinox, the water bearer. And it makes me think, because they portray it as a woman pouring out stars, that might be the reason that they warn about this time. And then, when we combine that with what we were talking about there and the positioning of the planets throughout the next year of 2024, we're going to be in some unique circumstances that if there was some interstellar or inside the solar system objects, we would be totally without any kind of protection. And not only from just the planets, but keep in mind that our magnetic field is also collapsing, which gives us further protection from those kind of things. So we're just completely vulnerable at this time period. And it makes you think maybe the people that have records of these entire giant cycles already knew that something usually happens about now, and maybe they would reset it. And it makes me think, you're talking about us being farmed. Let's just go with the oldest story on Earth, or at least one of the oldest stories, which was the Anunnaki, and they wanted us, a slave race of hybrid species, to mine the gold for them so they could pick it up and take it away off planet in large. Well, that's if you go with the Zechariah Sitchin kind of interpretation. But either way, they were so obsessed with the gold that they wanted it. And every single civilization, even the Stone Age civilizations, are obsessed with gold. Why in the middle of the Amazon, jungle, were they making little gold things and stuff like that? Because they didn't really have a use for it. Besides it being a shiny rock, it only has technological and maybe health aspects of technologies that you would have to be a high-tech civilization to understand. So when you hear these stories about these so-called gods that were obviously flesh and blood beings wanting gold. It makes you wonder what happened to the world's gold supply. As you know, you can't go to Fort Knox and verify that they have any gold there. The gold owned by the royal family, the now king over there, state secret. We'll never know how much they have. We don't really know how many, these continuity of government organizations have, like from the United States or Russia, China, really any of the bigger players, and how much they're hiding and for who. Why are they all collecting it up and putting it in secrecy? Is it just to maintain wealth into the next era after the reset, or is literally this time period when rent is due? I mean, there's a lot of options. I know it's kind of woo-woo, but our whole civilization is built on a corporate maritime law setup of banking. So it would make sense that the system that was established at the beginning, all the way back to Inky and the maritime laws that were kind of set forth there, have continued to this day. And, I've had an opportunity to talk with and interview Jordan Maxwell several times before he passed away a couple of years ago. And he was all about the hidden language that's right in us, how currency, how every terminology that represents money or manufacturing or any of that is all related to the ocean. And everything about civilization from the beginning had a strong connection to the ocean, even the fish suit, people and stuff like that. So we definitely are on the end of a cycle. But what could trigger an ice age immediately within 10 years? I don't know, maybe a couple of impacts from the bearer of water there that's pouring out the stars. What do you think?
Well, if you could, go to your favorite search engine and put in zodiac symbol of Aquarius. And it looks like energy, like two lightning bolts next to each other, a W formation. The classic, what you can see is like a lightning Z kind of thing in the sky. If it is indeed stars, I can answer part of your question, because the inverse happened after the Tonga eruption back in 2021. So how do these two mix and match? I can't even believe I know this information to even answer the question, which is quirky anyway, that I can't believe you would ask something like that. I go, the Tonga eruption in 2021, January, 2022, pushed up so much water vapor into the atmosphere, it pushed it up 180,000 feet into this one area called the mesosphere. It's a layer of the atmosphere. It's generally very dry. It's a desert layer, basically, because the only time that any particulates can get in there are when space debris comes ripping through from outside, coming into and either making ground impact or burning up in the sky. Shooting stars, it goes through that layer. And as it's burning up, it leaves leaves smoke up there. And that's where ozone can jump on those surfaces and then break down. Well, the inverse happened. We had so much water vapor pushed up into the atmosphere that it put up tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of times more water vapor crystals, ice crystals, creating now ice crystal clouds in the mesosphere. Now, this is where ozone can break down. So this year, we're going to have a runaway ozone depletion event coming in somewhere around late June, early July. The southern hemisphere is going to onset fast. It's already onsetting. You're good. There's losses already. They're unexplainable this early in the season. But the season for the regular ozone hole reaching maximum doesn't get there until like late October. We're months and months and months and months and months ahead of the ozone depletion where it normally should be. Now, if you're talking about the water bearer and all these shooting stars to come in through the atmosphere, they're also going to all pass through that same layer of the mesosphere. And leaving all that extra smoke up there would leave more ice crystal surfaces and surfaces for ozone to break down on. And at the same time, that kind of reflective particle up there. So there was one 1883, again, I'm trying to remember what it was. They call it the night of the falling sky. 10,000 average shooting stars coming through per hour. Now, it was a short event. lasted for one night, and that was it. But the weather around the planet subsequently changed for 2 years after that event. Well, it makes sense. If there was more burned up particulates in the mesosphere, it would have had the same effect of knocking down the ozone, causing some effects, runaway, weather cavitations, atmospheric cavitations, atmospheric bending, jet streams, cloud cells moving, intertropical convergence zone probably messed with in some blocking pattern for sure. So what if we do get the water bearer coming back? Well, we'll get a good indication. So it's pretty interesting, like how much, vapor trail could get put up in the mesosphere if the water bearer were pouring stars out, and like, let's say it turned into 10,000 average shooting stars, 10,000 an hour for a month. Like space is a vast place, vast. Who's not to say that we don't go through a microfine dust particle area that's going to take Earth an entire month to travel through, and every single night you're going to get 10,000 shooting stars per hour, every day, every night for months or even a month. Like the amount of sun blocking particulates up there would just, at the end of that event, you could definitely have an onset into some hugely massive cooling. So the ozone depletion event is going to occur this year. It's already onsetting. Not sure how that is going to affect crops, but I'm just saying, but if the globalists would like to run with a food shortage, they could certainly point to the ozone depletion event as a reason that crops are being wiped out across the southern hemisphere. That would add into the rice shortages in the Ukraine, not planting very much because they're in a war shortage. And it could just go on and on. It just depends on how much this fear thing is going to be run with the ozone depletion event in the southern hemisphere. Onsetting June. So think about that. It's going to be the most catastrophic, fastest, rapid depletion of ozone event ever recorded. Now, how would the media run with that? And what could they do to dovetail on top of a financial collapse to then bring in, oh no, the ozone hole, we can't grow food in the southern hemisphere for another 2 years. We got to go on rationing cards. Enough is enough. Every one for you, one for me. It's the only way, I'm just trying to make sense of it all myself, because these natural events are leading to real world celestial events right here on the planet's surface, right here, right now. We're all feeling and being affected by the celestial events. Now, the last question is, how are the elite riding on top of these natural events to get a greater outcome? Is the question, and it always has been the question. It will continue to be my question forever, I guess. But now I'm starting to sound like a broken record, so I'll Ransom back to you.
Well, that is the game, to figure out how they're playing us all the time. How are they going to use it's the same kind of tactic. It's order out of chaos, but before you can do that, you have to have the chaos. And, I thought some interesting things about this whole water bearer thing. And I've kind of actually been on this trip for a couple of years. Here, I'm showing everybody a picture of the high priestess, which is obviously a representation of Aquarius and the water bearer. As you can see, her dress flows out into water. But a lot of people don't notice that she is a woman. So she's number 9, and she's standing on what sometimes is a serpent, and a lot of times is the Islamic crescent moon, and she holds the Torah. So there's a lot of imagery in here, and she's standing behind in front of the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, or whatever you want to call it. Depicted as a fig, I think, on this one. But if you look up above her, there's a Roman numeral 2, and she is 9, and there is 11. And here beside her, what do you see? Is 2 towers that look like they're on fire. And this has been a thing for a long time, an image that's been around forever. And how ironic, what I was talking about the New World Order. She's 9, there's 9/11. But check this out. Not only this, what a coincidence. Aquarius used to be a dude. He used to be a dude, but now he's a chick. He used to be a dude that poured out the water out of the Aquarius thing, and he was always represented as a guy. But now in this new age, he is not a guy. He's the female personification of Aquarius in the modern time. So, how bizarre is that, with times, and it just shows you that they like to hide their symbology behind stuff. And if you can keep track, they kind of tell you what they're going to do to your face hidden all the way until about 2020, in which the occult became completely 2020 vision, where we could see it all, and they don't hide it now. Now they get together what used to be hidden meetings like Dr. Jekyll's Island or Jekyll's Island and Bilderberg and Davos. Now it's just all out open, and things like the World Economic Forum, where they tell you you're going to eat the bugs. And it makes me think that they are not playing, and they've been practicing this in several countries. So as an example, I was watching an interview of a woman that escaped North Korea when she was a teenager. It took her almost, I think, 10 years to get through China. Well, first she had to get smuggled around North Korea, and then to China, and then out of China. And finally, she's in the United States. She's doing interviews. And they asked her, what was it like there? What did you eat? And she was talking about, well, in the spring, they ate almost anything because they knew that the poison stuff didn't grow till late spring, early summer. And, when summer came around, they had to be careful about it, which plants to eat, because they didn't want to get caught eating it. And a lot of times they just ate grass, just straight up out of the yard grass, and so can you imagine being that hungry? Well, it's not that far-fetched when you have a centralized government with one monetary system that is a total dictatorship from the top down. And a lot of people like to use that as an example, as something different from here, but it's only 2 steps away here. All they need is the right emergency, the right, as you've seen in the past couple of years. So what will the next emergency be? Because they've already set up all of their emergency powers, and they've already labeled everyone insurgents. And now they're teaching people how to identify potential, and it's nothing new. They've been doing it since 2001, but how people are radicalized somehow. And if you start to read some of the things that the government thinks are radical or radical thinking, and guess what it is? It's growing your own food. It's bartering. It's thinking that you could be a self-sustaining person. So if these are things that are enemies of the state, you can see how this is going to roll out in the future, where there are 2 civilizations forming, and the only choice we have is to back it off, kick the can down the road again until the next technology. Can we make it through the reset? And that might be all it is. We may only have to make it through a certain time period that they have. They have to hurry up to get their plan implemented, and that's why they've been rushing for the last 20 years to get their new world order up and running. And guess what? Now it's an adult. So I would picture, really, according to occult and numerology and all that stuff, the absolute worst year that I see coming in the future would be 2033, because they love that 33, or possibly it could be this year, just being because we're 2023 and they love that 322 number. So I don't know. There's a lot to think about when you get into the woo-woo and the occult and what their plans are. The problem is they write books and they tell us what their plans are. They want to reduce us by 90%. They want to get to that net zero. They want to get rid of the problem, which is free, breathing, eating, thinking human beings on this planet. And in order to be a thorn in their side, you have to continue to be that key thing. I think, therefore I am. I know I'm alive, that's what we have to keep doing. We have to keep saying no to all their little trends that they try to set. You notice how they slowly got everybody into the apps as games and this and that. And now you're trapped in it to get any kind of secondary verification. You're trapped in it to get your money. You're trapped in it for your insurance and your ID and your medical information. So it's already been transferred to the phone. It's only that last little step for you to let go and go ahead and let them put it in your arm or on a pair of glasses or something a little closer to your brain. So you get into that symbiosis with this new female AI new world order, or as the Crowleyites like to call it, the age of Horus, where everybody gets to cover the earth in blood and do as they will after that. So we're in some pretty crazy times, but it's all predicted. It's all written down. It's all bragged about. And now it's here in our face, and everyone's still denying that that's what's going on.
You're making me feel all fuzzy right now. Ooh. feeling warm and feel like I need to be on the beach to forget it all. And I finally did come up and see that video you talked about with the tornado on top of the Rocky Mountains. They're spinning up a bunch of snow. I'm going to say that is absolutely, you're going to see signs in the skies. Like our atmosphere is at the point now it's cavitating with all these changes, and this is just the beginning of the complete disruption of food production globally. It's already been inbound anyway. The supply chain is breaking down, but I mean, we are really going to start to see it now. The cavitation is in play, and the more this ozone depletes down in the southern hemisphere, the more it's going to affect the subtropical lows and the cloud cells and the way those things generate and move clouds up from the equator, and how the patterns, of winds and electricity move our jet streams. It's going to be all too encompassing right now for anybody not to see it. It's literally going to be everywhere at all times. There'll be so many stories about losses of crops based on natural things that there'll be a tidal wave in itself, like we're seeing right now. Speaking of which, tidal wave of, I try to keep my lifestyle in check for sure. I'm good with my money to be able to, pay bills and not spend frivolously and, buy things that I truly need versus just impulses and just wants to keep up with the neighbors, and that I'm not into that. But to even try to keep just the most basic needs here in America going. After I came back from living overseas in 2020 when the COVID started, I came back to the States. And it is incredibly expensive to keep just your basic lifestyle of just being at a base minimum level with all the insurance, from the health insurance to the car insurance to the home insurance and, property insurance in case people come out on the farm and they get hurt. You got all these extra insurances on top of insurance. And it's just nonstop with taxes and property taxes and income taxes and self-proprietorship. Well, I get nailed with an extra 7.5% because I created my own business, so I'm penalized. Instead of being a slave sheep and going to work for somebody else, they penalized me because I started my own business and registered my own business. So now I had to pay all the Social Security and Medicaid by myself. That's another tax, 7.5% more out of my pocket. Just because I was smart enough to get out of the matrix and figure it out, so I'm not reliant on the companies. And everywhere you look, it's just so overwhelming with trying to keep the base. So and if I'm like that and I'm considered, living just simply, if my food price tripled or quadrupled, I'd be like, whoa, or 5X, I'd be like, all right, I need to buy more seeds and plant more food, but I could take care of it. What happens with people who are running razor thin, or they've already used up almost all their credit card balance because they're super negative every month and they can't? That is just going to completely wreck everything. So game it out. These events are inbound. And the reason I was trying to say that is Hal Turner radio show. I should have left that on there. Excuse me. Let me see. I am not the biggest fan of Hal Turner. I think he likes to, there's a lot of fear in the media that he pushes. But I've heard this from several other people. Hedge fund manager says government may restrict bank withdrawals. That's like the third or fourth person I've heard say this in just the last few days coming back. It's either hedge fund managers, portfolio managers, bank CEOs talking off the record, or those in the finance, economists talking off the record. It keeps coming back to the crescendo's been pushed, and the Treasury and the Fed may have to come in and actually restrict your right as a U.S. citizen to pull money out of the bank, so you don't pull the money out, so they stop the bank runs. And they're trying to stop short selling. JP Morgan came out and said, we've got to stop all the short sellers. So we're at the point now where they're coming and say you can't trade part of the market anymore because we need to stop the flight of capital out of the states, or They're considering now a lock on the U.S. bank deposits. And this is the governmental level. Don't worry, it's not the bank. There will be no run on the banks. This is completely different. They've set us up to think it was going to be a run on the banks. Look at that bait and switch right there. Because, you know, Ransom, me and you, we heard about this. Run on the banks, they're going to lock the bank. Run on the bank, bank's going to lock your phone. No, the government's going to usurp all the banks and lock it. And then there's nothing to do with the banks anymore. Then it's a governmental issue 100%. So capital uncertainty, what are you going to do when they come for you? So we'll be up with Jimmy Green tomorrow night, I think. I'm going to join on with their cast tomorrow night, midnight, which will be 9 p.m., starting here Pacific Radio time. Think about what you could prepare for yourselves. If you're not able to get to your money, what do you have right now? If, let's say, the government did lock all funds and gave you a withdrawal limit of $100 a day, what are you going to do? Like, what do you have set aside right now that you could live without money? Like, how would your life be without having access to money? I'm just wondering how they're going to stop people transferring money. You know, taking money out of the bank in an ATM is one thing, but how do you, say, okay, there's no more transfers of any money, so everybody defaults on all their mortgages at the same time because they can't transfer monies? I don't know. Are you going to walk in a bank with money and go, I got the money on my hand right here? Some banks will only let you wire it in. Ransom Godwin tonight, along with me here, Revolution Radio, Studio A. David DuByne signing off. Thanks for listening. It's going to be an integral month coming. Get ready for change. It's big.